Today we want to talk about managing conflict. Conflict can be incredibly difficult, especially on a church staff or team. Now there's a way to manage conflict and disagreements that come from the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 18 verses 15 through 17. It says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of two or three witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. In our attempt to work together in building a healthy staff culture with teams, we can be sure of two things. That you will not agree at every point with your teammates, and you will have to extend forgiveness to each other. And that is working right off the bat with your team, whether they have a conflict with you as a leader or one another. So how do we work toward reconciliation? There's a simple formula when someone sins against you. And of course, it's in the scripture verse of Matthew 18. Go directly to the person. If that doesn't work, what we tell our staff team is involve your supervisor. Meet with the person and your supervisor. And then the third step, if that doesn't work, involve the lead pastor. And if that doesn't work, go to what we call the Staff Parish Relations Committee liaison, or if you have a church board, is there a liaison or a person that could be an advocate for the staff and maybe even the congregation when an issue arises? So how do we live out this formula in a staff culture? Well, the first thing is to understand the difference between hurt feelings and being sinned against. The Greek word used is hamartia, which literally means to miss the mark. The mark or standard missed is God's holy law. To paraphrase the intent of the original language, we could say if a Christian brother or sister clearly misses the mark so that his or her conduct toward you is a violation of God's holy law, go and tell them his or her fault. The fact that Christ is discussing real sin, an actual volition or violation of God's law, is important for two reasons. It means that Christians should not take offense over personality difference, cultural differences, socioeconomic differences, and so on. Further, there are many rubs and offenses that occur in life that may not be directly the result of sin. Some Christians are offended over trivial matters that are not sins at all. Proverbs 10 verse 12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers a multitude of sins. Plainly, every rub and offense cannot be raised and settled. We must learn in love to forgive and pass by many slights, annoyances, and even offenses. Much heartbreaking and much needless trouble often comes of offenses which exist only in the imagination. We have to choose to think the best in people rather than always being suspicious of others without real cause. And that's something new and still in our teams. The person who has a judgmental, suspicious spirit often is guilty of accusing others of bad motives where none exist, and of misrepresenting things that are innocent acts. So how do we approach someone who has sinned against us? Humility. You do not go to punish and humiliate the other person, but to help and reconcile. Receiving personal satisfaction for our hurt feelings is not the primary goal. Being heard in the reconciliation of the relationship is the primary goal. So in your staff teams or the people you lead, you aren't going to take satisfaction in the downfall of another staff member or teammate, because we are called to act out of a spirit of love, concern, and humility, which runs throughout chapter 18. Point out the wrong in a calm, rational manner. You are there to convince, to win over the other person. You will almost certainly not succeed at your task if you lose control of your temper and heap insults on the other person. Acting like an arrogant jerk is not the way to convince anyone. Remember, this is your brother or sister for whom Christ died. No matter what the other person has done, place the other person above yourself. Do not act in a way that would undermine the goal of reconciliation and restoration. Another factor is to listen carefully. No matter how convinced you are that you are right, you must carefully listen to and weigh the offender's argument. You could be wrong, so you must consider the possibility that your accusations may be a mistake. Even if you believe that you have an open and shut case, you must give your coworker or your teammate a thorough opportunity to respond. The third is there is no real reason to talk with others about your issue or for other people about your coworker or your supervisor without going directly to them. So in your teams, you encourage people to directly go to other folks and not talk outside and tell 4 other people before they decide to go to the person. Remember, the goal is reconciliation. Things will not get better on their own. Avoidance doesn't work. The most common reason why we don't talk to others when we are sideways is because it's difficult. There's a fear of offending the other person, losing a friend, or even making an enemy. Most people hate conflicts, so the fear of approaching another person must be overcome. What happens if we avoid confronting? We disobey Christ's command. Therefore, disregarding what he says is not an option for believers. Ignoring it because you hate conflict does not eliminate it, it only postpones it. By going immediately, it eliminates the temptation to gossip and damage another person. For many, it's easier to talk with others rather than go to the person. So when we're developing our staff teams and our cultures and leading these teams, we don't think that conflict will ever happen, but it will. It's unavoidable. So how do we handle that conflict? And as the leader, how do you facilitate a healthy culture where people can dialogue and reconciliation can take place? It's going to come from teaching and training and exemplifying what you want to do in your culture and how you want to lead your people.